welcome to the CNBC TV18 special. We're counting down to the budget. I'm Shireen Bhan, and joining me here today on the CNBC TV18 BMR Big Picture, Gokul Chaudhary, Ravi Uppal, Vivek Gupta, and in Mumbai, Pawan Goenka. Gentlemen, appreciate you joining us here on the CNBC TV18 special. Let me start by asking you to give me a sense of what the mood is like. And Mr. Uppal, let me start by asking you that. How confident is corporate India feeling today as we go into budget 2016?
Well, I think the mood is cautiously optimistic. One does realize that government has started a lot of new projects and schemes, and hopefully they should bring some kind of, stimulus to the economy. We do see some early signs of that in railway, road sector, a couple of other sectors connected with the infrastructure.
So are you in the camp that believes that we are perhaps likely to see a takeoff in that sense, because a lot of these projects which have now been approved are going to hit the ground, perhaps in the next 2 quarters?
Well, we're hoping for that. I think, in India, the commodities have really sort of suffered a lot. So let's hope that the new budget will bring some hope for them. The best thing, the most important thing we're looking forward to is kind of major demand stimulus.
Okay, major demand stimulus is what you're expecting. Gokul, let me ask you now, what is your key expectation as we go into budget 2016? And, it is going to be a tightrope walk for the finance minister. There's the fiscal consolidation roadmap on the one hand, and there's the demand of industry on the other to try and stimulate growth, even though we are growing at 7.6%.
So one of the things is, when we spoke to a lot of CEOs, 90% of them said this budget is a very important milestone for the government to demonstrate its pro-growth agenda.
Okay.
They also said that they are looking forward to an agenda and a budget which will show that the government is serious on being non-adversarial on tax agenda.
Then it doesn't help that they've just had a tax reminder to the likes of Vodafone, right?
Well, that is a bugbear that this government and this finance minister has to deal with. It's been troubling this government from the very beginning. And I think if they were to pursue the international arbitration and bring this ugly chapter to a close, the sooner they do it, the better it is.
Okay, but that's not really in that sense a budget issue. But Vivek, what would your big expectation really be? Is this going to be a game changer? I mean, everyone's talking about how this could be a game changer budget, but we've heard that in the previous years as well. What should we really expect, or what are you expecting?
See, the most important thing is that this government came into power on a platform that promised almost ruthlessly efficient execution.
Okay.
That was the core platform as to why we have the Modi government today. So what I would be wanting to see from this budget is policies that demonstrate this ruthlessly efficient execution. I'm not necessarily looking for new ideas.
Okay.
I'm saying there are a bunch of 10 things, 15 things that one has identified need to be done. This is a team of people that is perhaps the most suited to do it. So let's go ahead and do it.
Okay.
So that is one. The second point.
How have they fared on the ruthless execution promise?
So I think lots has started, as Mr. Uppal mentioned. I think good stuff with Make in India, Startup India, etc. has begun to happen. But we actually need to see specific translation of that on the ground.
Okay.
The budget, I think, in the way the Indian budgets now have become, are a good opportunity for the government to go ahead and execute through amendments in finance bill, through amendments in allied legislation.
Sure.
It seems that's the only legislation that goes through these days. So through this opportunity should be used by the government to hammer home this whole point of ruthlessly efficient execution. So that's point one.
And the ease of business.
And therefore, and that's a part of this ruthlessly efficient execution, what I call efficient execution. The second point is there are certain sectors in the economy which are suffering and which have, if not dealt with, have the potential to impact other sectors. So I'm not in the camp which says, autos are suffering, therefore give SOPs to auto. But yes, if banking is suffering and that can impact a wider cross-section of sectors, can impact the economy as a whole, we have to do something to set it right.
Okay.
We don't have to wait for the Supreme Court to do something.
Yeah, you're right on that front. And that seems to be one of the big focus areas that we hope the government is going to address. At least those are the smoke signals that one is getting from North Block. Gokul, specifically on the banking side and for the financial services sector on the whole, what would your expectation be? Higher recapitalization, obviously, as far as banks are concerned, which is the expectation today. But anything beyond that?
Well, one of the things is on the NPAs and how the sector is hoping for some sort of a tax framework or tax deductibility framework in relation to the provisioning for NPAs.
Okay.
So that's one piece of it. We are also looking at it broader from an industry perspective, that the government did talk about the roadmap for exemptions and deductions to be going away, and the corporate tax rates to actually come down. I think the industry will be hoping for the first definitive steps from the finance minister to bring down the corporate tax rate.
So 1% corporate tax rate cut?
At least a 1% cut, because anything less than that will not be meaningful.
Meaningful. Okay, so you're hoping for 1, if not 1.5%.
Absolutely.
Okay, Mr. Uppal, the cut will also mean that certain exemptions will go away, and perhaps we will see a much more definitive roadmap being articulated by the finance minister as far as the exemptions that will be brought to a close as well. Industry gearing up to cope with that?
Well, I think, last year the finance minister had announced that he's going to gradually bring down the corporate tax rate to about 25% over the next 4 years, but he's going to do away with all the exemptions. And I think that's a good resolve. I think we need to sort of act on that seriously. And anything that you save on the corporate tax, you're basically enabling the industry to flow back the same savings into the investment. I think that's definitely a good step. I just would like to add one thing, basically responding to the observation you made. I think you can divide our economy in two parts. You've got the service sector, which makes up 60%, and you're the 40%, comprising industry and agriculture.
Right.
So this 60% growing at 6 to 10% gives you 6% out of so-called 7.4%. And the other two sectors are giving just about 1.4%. I think the 7.4% can create a veneer on the overall performance of the other two sectors. And I think, that is what we need to consider. Within the industry, I think the core sector industries are still not recovered. The government is very serious. They're looking at it, but I think we need to do more. I'm really worried that the government's, or rather the RBI in particular, the excessive focus on declaring NPAs, forcing the banks to sort of do that, I think is not really enabling the economy.
There are 2 points of view on that. One, that this kind of surgical approach is the need of the hour, and there is the other camp that believes, led by Mr. Parekh, that believes that this is actually going to lead to comatose banks. There are many camps on whether a bad bank is the right approach or not. Then, of course, there's a division even on the fiscal deficit. Should there be a slippage? Should not? Should there not be a slippage? So I think we're dealing with many divided opinions on a lot of issues. But let me bring in Pawan Goenka as well. Mr. Goenka, I think you would probably be looking very carefully as far as the excise is concerned, and whether we are likely to see at least a higher excise duty as far as diesel cars are concerned. But beyond that, sir, what is the expectation that you have from the budget?
Well, frankly, I am not focusing so much on excise this year. That is a very small thing in the bigger scheme of things that we have been talking about. And 2 or 3% here and there tinkering is not going to make any difference in the global or the macro thing that we're looking at. Everybody is talking about how this budget is a very important budget, and it is. Everybody is saying about agri focus and the focus on infra. That is a must, and I'll be very surprised if we don't see that. And everybody is saying that this has to be a budget that really establishes the credibility of what the agenda the BJP government has set up, and I think, again, it's very important. In my view, the schemes, initiatives that have been announced so far by the BJP government in the last 18 months, if all of these succeed, India will be a different country. And therefore, what I would like to see in this budget, rather than being specific, is how do we get confidence that the schemes that the government of India has put in, whether it's Make in India, whether it's Digital India, whether it's Startup India, there is a clear force behind these schemes, and they will indeed be seen to become real.
Okay. All right, so a bunch of things that have been promised as part of the Digital India plan, the Make in India plan, the Startup India plan, and I'll address those specifically in just a bit. But Mr. Goenka, if I were to ask you, in terms of what the government could do on the agri side, because there seems to be an acknowledgement that the agri distress has perhaps been poorly handled by the government, and this budget is likely to emphasize on trying to revive not just rural demand, but also the the agricultural sector. Specifically, what do you expect, or what would you hope this budget to do?
Well, if I could be so bold as to say that perhaps this government has lost some political capital in the way the agri has been handled. Whether it's justified or not, but they certainly have lost some political capital. And the reason that has happened is that perhaps they have looked a little bit more towards longer-term investment in agriculture than a short-term help to the farmers. Therefore, what I would think is that there will be a little bit better balancing that will be done this year of providing sort of immediate assistance to the farmer, because farmers certainly are under distress. There is no doubt about that, and clearly the economy has suffered in many verticals because of the distress in the rural India. Therefore, I would say that this whole scheme that was announced on the crop insurance, I think somehow that has been undermined in terms of what it can do. And in my view, the way I have understood the scheme, it can really be a game changer for the farmers and for the agriculture economy if it is implemented correctly and if it is not misused in the way it is implemented. So that would be one thing that I would like to see on how do we translate that scheme into real, tangible, something that is very visible. Second is irrigation scheme. Again, a little bit longer term, probably will not have an immediate impact, but something that I think if we put focus on, it will be very good. The NREGA should probably be used a little bit more in terms of driving the rural economy than what has been done in the past. And the rural road scheme that has been announced, the Gramin Sadak Yojana, that will be another focus. So if you put these 3 or 4 things together and ensure that there is a good MSP support, I think that's required. The minimum support price has to be taken care of. I'm not a very big proponent of it in general, but right now, clearly with the input cost going up, that they have gone up in the last couple of years, clearly the revenue coming down because of crop damage that has happened or the lack of crop that has happened. Right now, there is definitely need for a minimum support price, though that's not a budget issue, but it has to be provided for in the overall allocation to the Agriculture Department.
All right. Let me come to something that is being speculated on at this point in time, and that could perhaps be the nasty surprise that we see in this budget, and that is any tweaking on the long-term capital gains tax. Gokul, you want to address that? What we're picking up is that there is a split house within the finance ministry as well on whether they should or shouldn't tweak it. How negative would it be if they do decide to go in favor of tweaking?
Well, they have moved the needle last time on the capital gains for shares by saying, you need to hold the unlisted shares for 3 years for being long-term capital gains and so forth. They've abandoned somewhere the entire agenda with the direct tax code had first brought in, which said that, if you are disposing of a capital asset and then you go reinvest in another capital asset, there should not be any capital gains at all. And I think it's probably necessary for them to make 1 or 2 changes, which will be a little more towards encouraging equities, one of which could be the very fact that you could bring in a lower rate of capital gains on long-term shares, let's say held for de minimis period of 4 or 5 years.
Okay.
So if they were to try and bring some of those initiatives in, then it would be a very useful measure.
Okay. You want to add to that, Vivek, before I take a quick break?
See, fundamentally, a 25% tax rate, which is what this government indicated last year, is the correct tax rate. Over long term, and my short-term answer may be different, but over the long term, I do not mind seeing all taxes move to that rate.
Okay.
Like you can have a revenue-neutral GST, you can have a good income tax rate. So conceptually, the move to align capital gains tax with usual business taxation is a move that should be done.
Okay, but you're saying the timing is
now the right time?
Not appropriate.
Perhaps not.
Okay.
Can a roadmap for that be laid out? Maybe yes. But now, of course, there will be an immediate negative impact.
Absolutely.
In terms of what we would see happen. And Gokul's right. For debt securities, for unlisted equity, we've already moved the needle somewhat. So at 20%, is the government at 20% plus surcharge? Is the government reasonably okay? I think they're reasonably okay in the short term.
Okay.
But fundamentally, yes, absolutely.
And I think that's perhaps what is being debated at this point in time, whether it's the appropriate thing to do at this point in time, given the global market volatility and the volatility that we've been seeing on the Lal Street as well. We are going to have to take a quick commercial break, but come back to us. You're watching the CNBC TV18 VMR Budget Big Picture. We're back with you in just a minute. Welcome back. You're watching the CNBC TV18 BMR Budget Big Picture. We're in conversation with industry leaders on what Budget 2016 is going to mean for the Indian economy. Pawan Goenka, we've been talking about, how this government has been in mission mode. Let's talk about one of the missions, and that is Make in India. The Make in India week just concluded in Mumbai. From a manufacturing perspective, what is it that you would like? And in the light of the fact that the GST continues to be in limbo, but perhaps we will see a roadmap signaling the move towards GST, what would you like to see this budget address?
Well, as far as GST is concerned, obviously that's a disappointment for the industry, manufacturing industry, and obviously nothing will happen in the budget on GST. But I'm certainly hoping that either in the budget session, and if not budget session, monsoon session, GST will come back, and I would hope that we will get an approval for it and implement GST either on 1st October or 1st April. It will be very disappointing if that does not happen, because I think it's established without any doubt that GST is going to be good for the economy overall and good for the efficiency of the economy overall. When I come to Make in India, the big event that happened in Mumbai, I consider it to be a great success, a very big showcase for India's power and manufacturing. And I personally was very impressed with the whole show. I participated quite a bit. I think as we look at it, the interest in investing in manufacturing in India from outside India certainly is going up. That there's no doubt about. A lot of MOUs were signed, but I'm not going to read too much into those numbers. What is still lacking is the investment that is happening from within India into manufacturing to the level that government would like to see. And the focus now also has to come in on how do we get investment from within India into manufacturing. For that, there are certain things that need to be done in terms of enabling investment, certain things that need to be done in terms of facilitating export from India, which I think needs a lot of focus in my view, that how do you facilitate export from India. Again, it's not a budget matter, but perhaps in trade policy that can come in on how do we facilitate export from India. And also clearly the demand generation will automatically bring investment. You don't need to do anything. If demand happens, then investments will happen automatically. But there is a feeling right now that perhaps there is more thrust on sort of getting outside India investment into manufacturing than India investment. At least that's the feeling that some of us get. And I would like to see how we have the same focus on Indian investment. The ease of doing business, a lot of work has been done. Some of it has sort of filtered on ground. Some of it is not filtered on ground. And that focus should continue and very important. And longer term, we have to focus on technology if we really want to make in India work, which is again not so much of a budget issue, but some thrust coming on technology in the budget to kind of promote technology so that Make in India becomes a sort of much bigger aspiration for us than just becoming a sweatshop.
That leads me to Startup India and Digital India. Vivek, lots of promises that have been made by the government. What would you like to see specific? Because a lot of these items will have to be incorporated into the budget for them to be a reality, the promises made.
That's right. So on Startup India and Digital India, the good thing is we now have very identified, specified items that need implementation. So you need certain tax treatment for investments by angels, VCs, alternative investment funds. You need certain tax provisions to be tweaked. That has to be done as part of the budget. You need some changes in the Companies Act because you've determined that for startups a different mode of operation can work. That change must be brought in as an ancillary legislation during the session. So luckily, because you had expert committees, you are now seeing a bunch of very specific ideas, at least in the Startup India theme. And one would imagine that given the wide consensual approval that those provisions have got, it would not be very difficult for the government to implement all of that. That does not even take away revenue from the budget, etc. So I would expect to see in toto all of the recommendations that we have seen and which the government has also publicly supported come in the legislation in the manner it is intended. And in the manner it is intended is a very important proviso that I add to all drafting that I've seen with this government, that I've seen with governments over the last so many years.
Yes, Gokul, you want to add to that?
We saw, for example, that the government did bring in the place of effective management rules last year. And then when they started getting fleshed out, it's created more agony than it solved. We brought in the ICDS, the tax rules, which is there, and again, they have not had the effect of easing business. They've actually caused greater complexity in business. So I think if you go back to what Vivek is saying, yes, the drafting of the rules is a very important step, including on the roadmap for taking away the exemptions or putting the sunset on exemptions. Specifically on weighted deductions, for example, for R&D.
R&D, yeah.
The expectation is that...
Which is critical to all of this.
Absolutely.
Digital India, Make in India, Startup India, all of that, yeah.
Right. So the framework for that has to be embedded in the law this time, and I hope the draftsmen do a decent job of it. And it's not that they override the intent with another hidden agenda.
Oh, well, we're all hoping for that. But let me ask you this. In terms of innovative ideas that we could expect, especially as far as financing is concerned, we've seen what the railways are trying to do as far as the bonds. So, off-budget, innovative financing ideas, the NIIF, perhaps we could see more sort of detailing on how that's going to be utilized and taken forward. What would you expect? Mr. Uppal, anything on that front that you expect as far as innovative financing ideas from the government?
But I think
and especially on the public-private partnership, in the light of the fact that the Kelkar recommendations have already been submitted.
I think one thing that, that has really eluded us in the recent years is the effectiveness of the PPP. I think we need to really revitalize this. And the Kelkar committee has made some very, very good recommendations to revive the whole process. I think what is missing today in the economy, the government is of course putting a lot of money to kickstart the economy, but the contribution from private sector is conspicuously missing. One way to get them in without putting too much capital in is to revive the PPP thing. And I think Kelkar has given us a framework whereby we can revive that sector. Okay,
so recommendations of the Kelkar committee. I'm going to get wrap-up comments from each one of you. The top 3 things that you would like to see, Gokul, in the budget.
Can they implement the Ishwar committee along with the TARC, which Dr. Shom had done, put and implement the roadmap for corporate tax rate reduction, and of course defer some of the provisions like the POEM and the ICDS to a point of time when we have more sensible rules around them.
Okay.
Well, I would want government to obviously increase their investment in
infrastructure.
I think one issue which will really resolve many problems affecting our economy is the revival of demand. And I think government must go all out to see how demand can be revived, and employment can be generated. I think that's very important. Second thing which has been much talked about, but I never fail to say it again, is I think the government has to reduce the lending rate to the industry.
Okay.
At 11 to 12% is a bit too high for anyone to invest, especially from the private
So the governor will say, you stick to the fiscal consolidation roadmap and I'll see what I can do as far as interest rates are concerned.
But I think the governor's intention is very good with regard to the fiscal, deficit control. But I think what will take precedence? I think it's the growth which has to take precedence at this moment.
So lower lending rates, which is not exactly a budget item, but Vivek, your top priorities.
Efficient execution, get in experts, don't be shy of... Aadhaar was a great success because you had Mr. Nilekani there. Don't be shy of using digital means to have a very efficient, intelligent tax system. I don't think our tax administration runs very intelligently, frankly. And you can do a lot in that area. Use analytics, data, etc. So efficient execution, point 1. Look at sectors that are in trouble, which can have ripple effects on other sectors.
One sitting right in the middle,
core sectors. So PPP, I agree with. Banking sector has to be dealt with head-on. So look at sectors where there is bleeding. And 3, we don't need too many more innovative ideas. The ideas are on the table.
Just get on with implementing them.
And if experts are required for the execution, don't be shy at all.
Okay. Mr. Goenka, I'll give you the last word, sir.
Pretty much agree with Vivek. Ruthless focus on execution of all the schemes that are important right now. 2 verticals, culture and infrastructure, because they are enablers for many other. And third thing that I would like to add is not lose or not go too far from the fiscal deficit targets that we had, which probably means that if you were to do the first and second, you probably need to decide what you're going to give up, because otherwise you will have to probably dilute the fiscal deficit target.
And the consensus seems to be that if they do slip, it'll probably be around 3.7 to 3.8% for FY17. And most people seem to believe, or at least one significant camp seems to believe, that that will be a tolerable slippage on the fiscal deficit front. But is that the road that the government will take or not? We'll find out on the 29th of February. Gentlemen, as always, it's a pleasure speaking with you here on CNBC TV18. Thank you very much, and we'll check back with you when the Finance Minister presents his budget on how much of what we've discussed finally makes its way into the fine print. Till then, from all of us here, goodbye. Many thanks for watching.